On this edition of the program, Kirk Bado joins us to talk about the Democrats' search for how to talk to men. Also, Katherine Dee about internet subcultures and a tone that is way darker than this one, and the hokey pokey when it comes to Trump's tariffs. But I'm in Fort Lauderdale because my mom is retiring. Look at that, with her granddaughter.
Hi, everyone.
It's all coming up.
The following is brought to you by Just Another Pilot.
Hello, fellow men and men enjoyers. We are here to discuss how to talk to men with fellow man Kirk Bado of National Journal Hotline. How you doing, buddy?
It's great here, Justin, to be a man talking to a man about men. This is, I think we should just sit around. We can start naming off wide receivers.
Yep.
We can start talking about poker
Whoa,
games.
whoa. Don't get too advanced.
Sorry,
That's like the 501 course. Naming old wide receivers, that's an advanced language. That's a syntax that you're going to need another $20 million to understand.
Right. Sorry, we should pause this. That's on like part 3 of the syllabus.
Yes.
That's an additional $10 million here. It's like Scientology. You have to keep buying installments.
Come on, man. We can get like 3
up.
boats into this before we even just say, hey, if you want to relate to men, just talk about old baseball players. Like that's all you have to do. Like, but we can get 100 million out of these guys before that.
I think we are 100% in the wrong line of work. We could have really done a lot of damage here. I mean, $20 million for Sam, the Speaking with American Men. I mean, the podcasts are out there for free. You and I are both big fans of the Bill Simmons podcast. I know everyone talks about how we need to find liberal Joe Rogan. Liberal Joe Rogan's right here. Why are we just not just grinding that tape as Democrats? Like my head was exploding reading that. And I'm very excited to be here with you to talk men and figure out how Democrats can talk to men.
I mean, I guess the best thing that you can say about that New York Times article that came out, we talked about it on Wednesday's show, but is that when you are an alcoholic, the first step is admitting you have a problem. Right. So even if this is a insane solution that is doubling down on all the bad habits that the Democratic Party has, they're at least admitting that yelling at men to stop being sexist and homophobic and racist is not a great idea. Maybe don't start there. Maybe
don't start the conversation like that. The bar is just on the floor here for what we expect from Democrats here.
All right, but let's take the issue seriously, because they are going to spend $20 million to try to understand the syntax of the American man and identify. This is a separate thing. Both of these things kind of hit at the same time, but the idea of a liberal Joe Rogan, which, of course, we cannot go much further without pointing out that the liberal Joe Rogan is Joe Rogan. Correct. He was, he's largely non-political. Like, he really only got more explicitly political during the lockdowns when he was personally affected by things. But otherwise, he was just a stoned stand-up comic who liked Bernie Sanders. Like, he had like baseline progressive values, and really the only thing that chased him off of that, and this is, I think, part of the hidden real lesson for Democrats, is that Joe Rogan was a baseline liberal who believed every negative thing that had been told to liberals throughout, the 90s and the 2000s about Republicans. Right. They're greedy. They're evil. They're there for the rich guy. They're not there for the poor guy. All of that, right? And he didn't really ever change his tune on that until A, he felt boxed in by liberal policies in California, and B, liberal groups, including Midas Touch, who are now in ascendancy with their own podcast, targeted him for COVID opinions. And pushed Spotify to drop him. He became this main character on cable news. And from that point, Rogan is like, well, if that's true, if they can make me into a fire-breathing, insane cartoon character, then how much more do I need to question about my political opinions? And it eventually leads him to endorsing Donald Trump. But that's the lesson. The lesson is you had a guy that you are now chasing after.
Right. I think it's a lesson in the overreach of cancel culture as well, because it seems like he was the biggest would-be victim of that. And I think one of the problems with the Democrats is not just that they're running out figures like Joe Rogan from the party for not adhering, especially to the COVID protocols that we're talking about here. But I mean, I think it's COVID protocols that now Pete Buttigieg is out on the bulwark talking about how he wouldn't have had them as strict as he would have otherwise. Okay, I want to talk to you about that clip later too, because if I saw one more like DC Democrat or strategist sharing that and saying, I love Pete Buttigieg. Yeah, like this is a guy who gets it. I'm like, that is going to go so well in New Hampshire. That's great. Wonderful. I mean, again, he's going to be your very well-to-do, well-read Democrats' favorite candidate in 2028. Well,
here's the thing. The thing with that clip,
he gets to a voter, it's over.
The thing with that clip is that it's like, this is, if you haven't seen it, it's the Bulwark interviewing Pete Buttigieg. He has a beard now. He's a very big boy. Right. And he is like, all right, 2020, what would you do different? And he's like, well, you got to open those schools sooner. And you got to take the border more seriously. And it's like, so Ron DeSantis, just be Ron DeSantis. Right. If you could go back, you'd be Ron DeSantis. You'd be a Republican.
Correct. Like you would do the Glenn Youngkin playbook.
Yes.
Is that what you're trying to say here?
Well, and it's like, okay, well, number one, congratulations on taking the least possible option and then taking no responsibility. No responsibility for like, oh, I was also a thought leader. I had a say in this. I was in the cabinet. Granted, he was in transportation, so it's not like he was in the purview there. But like, it's just, it's this weird rewriting of history for them that is, I think, genuinely damaging if what you want to do is build trust with the electorate. Right. Like it has to be truth and reconciliation. You have to say, and the problem is they want to get to the solution, but they don't want to address the problem. This is one of my things with like the abundance book is that like they do a great job of talking about all the problems, right?
Right.
They don't do a great job of saying, hey, maybe a high-speed rail without just saying we're going to eminent domain all this land and we're just going to have to take the heat for it. Maybe that's a bad idea.
Well,
maybe
that works so well with the highway system, like what are we thinking here?
Maybe we shouldn't have done that. Like there were systemic problems. The issue with both of those things that Pete Buttigieg said is, okay, so do you want to stuff Randy Weingarten and the teachers union into a closet? Because that's what you're saying. If you're saying that you wanted to open the schools, are you going to then take the next step and say, this is what we should have listened less to Randy Weingarten? Mm-hmm. And then on the border, were we going to listen less to the groups that wanted us to be more lenient on the border? Like you can't have one without the other. You can't just say magically, I would have convinced all these things. You need to say, here's where our fork in the road was. We went left. We should have went right. And here's why we went left instead of going right. But
it's not engaging in that why. It's not engaging in that why at all. It's very
calorie
much
free.
It's wish casting back onto this scenario here with everything right. It's like anytime that you and I've read so many post games from these strategists who just say, I told that campaign, why don't we try winning instead of losing? But they weren't listening to me. And it's like, you are not telling us anything right now. Like the Pete Buttigieg clip going around is, yes, he's very good at interviews. Yes, he's one of the best. He was one of the best spokespeople for the administration. Despite being in the transportation role, he was also a chief surrogate, not just for the Biden campaign, but for the Biden White House as well. And I think that's going to be beyond this wish casting of 2020 and with the coulda, woulda, shouldas. He's going to get caught, I think, in the blast radius of the Biden fallout here right now. Because, again, he was one of the most visible defenders. Yeah. I haven't watched the full Bulwark clip that we're talking about here from the full sit down. But how did he not know about the decline of Biden? And why is he out there trying to spin it? And again, that goes back to your point that there is a trust gap with voters right now. And I think that's going to be a lot of Democrats' problems come to 2028.
Well, also, the 2028 nominee is going to be somebody who trashes the current establishment in the Democratic Party. It's not going to be somebody who comes from inside of it. Now, it can be somebody who comes from the inside to the outside. You know, Pete Buttigieg could go out somewhere. He could go on Pod Save America and say, you want to know what? We need to investigate Joe Biden because she hid the president from America, and now I don't know what to think. I don't know. He might have had cancer while he was president. I have no idea. Like, she hit him. We need to talk to her. That would be cataclysmic, right? That would be a stab in the back to the Bidens. They'd be furious. They would spread any dirt they had. And guess what? He would be rewarded for every second of it because people want answers. They want answers so they can trust the next thing you say. And that's the biggest, to go back to the man thing, it's authenticity. And, you know, there's been this batting back and forth because he's still been very vocal about Tim Walz. Tim Walz is a fine VP pick if you're going to go on a more progressive stance because his best talent is explaining universal health care with a Cabela's metaphor. That's who he is. You want to know who he's not? The Friday Night Lights coach. And that's who they tried to cast him as, which means you fundamentally misunderstand what a high school coach is. Like, that's not the dude. He's the English teacher that you come out to. He's not the guy that gives you the pregame speech and makes you want to run through a wall. And if you don't understand that, then you don't understand dudes.
No, he's not Mr. Friday Night Lights. And
no,
it all comes back to your take. It's about being authentic here. And I think Walz kind of gave the game away during his little post-game tour that he's been doing, where he talked about how he was brought on so he could code switch to dudes
code
here.
Switch.
You know what I love hearing as a straight white dude when people say that they need to code switch to talk to me. It's that type of like consultant talking points that are the reason why they lost so much with men. It's the reason why they lost so much with young people. The Catalyst After Action report, largest gender gap by about 12 points that they've ever seen since they've been doing this After Action report here.
Yeah.
And it comes down to authenticity. And when you're speaking in talking points like that, we have a joke in hotline here because they tried to cast him as that Friday Night Lights coach, and as part of their we need to be more approachable, they had him do a Twitch stream with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Yep. And
he tweeted out afterward, they're playing Madden, and afterwards he tweeted out, AOC runs a mean pick six. Like, what are we talking about here? What are we talking about here? And so anytime that someone does something like that, we all talk about, we really need a mean pick six here.
If you are listening and you don't understand why that's funny, a pick six is an interception in football where the defense catches a offensive pass. You don't run one.
Right.
It doesn't, it is, you can't
dial that up.
Yeah. If you want to get into coverage schemes, you can say, the slot corner baited the quarterback by fading out and then ran it. But you don't run a mean pick six. That just does not happen.
No, that's
not a thing that anyone has ever said.
No, and that's again going back to just being authentic. And that's the biggest problem I think Democrats have right now. But I wanted to pose this question to you, as I've been reading, even before you asked me to come on today, I've been reading all these post-game reports, going through the Catalyst survey, seeing how bad things are for Democrats. I wanted to pose a question to you. Are we overstating how bad this is for them? Now, I know we just spent the last 15 minutes badgering them about how authentic it is, but are we overstating how bad this is for them? Because I'm thinking a lot about, yes, they lost ground in almost every major demographic group, except for whiter, older, more educated voters. Those are the folks who are more likely to turn out in special elections, off-year elections, midterm elections. And when we're talking about how deep Democrats are in the wilderness, they're outperforming expectations in the special elections this year so far. They flipped a few state legislative seats in Iowa and Pennsylvania. And as we look ahead to 2026, which, every time Trump has not been on the ballot in the last almost 10 years,
it's dicey.
It's been a dicey electorate for Republicans. There's a pretty good chance that Democrats are probably going to flip the House. If things break their way, they're not going to flip the Senate, but they could come close and set it up for 2028. But I just think that all this hand-wringing that the party's going through right now and that people like you and I are talking about, it's going to get washed away when they outkit their coverage. Again, if you have to look that up, this is men talking to men right now. Come the midterms next year. So I just wonder if this reckoning that they think they're having is going to be put on pause because there is brighter lights on the horizon. There is more favorable winds. And in this two-party system we have right now, if people are going to be pissed off at the economy, there's not really much else for people to run to besides the Democrats. So I've been thinking about that.
I love I just want to use as many male metaphors now for the rest of this interview as possible. It's not the end of the world, right? What I would say is that they're a lot like the Timberwolves or the Knicks going into a game 4. Like, you can see a world in which they're going to be fine. They even the tide. It's a 2-2 series. Or you could see a world, which is what happened for both those teams over the last few nights. It's a 3-1 game, and now it looks all but death to them. Here's the largest problem with the Democratic Party, in my opinion. They are not historically, and I mean this going back decades, an institutional party. They have been a party in which once every 10 years, there is like a warrior tribe. The old warrior gets decapitated. The new young warrior comes in, murders all of the old warriors' lieutenants, and brings in all their own people. That's how it has been since 1960, since the Kennedys did it. You don't have an orderly line of succession of these people come and these people come and these people come. That's just not how they've worked up until now, since 2008. Where the Democrats find themselves right now is just they have a really, really ossified, out of touch institutional structure that they have never historically succeeded with. So, yes, I agree with you. This is not the end of the world, but it's going to be incumbent on somebody seizing control of that party. And the one thing that party has been really good at since 2016 is fending off challengers.
Right.
Is
they've been able to
back
circle the wagons pretty well.
Yes. And it's like, when I look at why the party is not healthy right now, it's because you couldn't deal with RFK running. No. Like, you couldn't deal with, you chased a coalitional piece across the street. And they did it happily.
And you changed the rules to protect an incumbent who's not up to the task.
It wasn't just, look, you want to whisper to all your friends in the media about how RFK is a brainworm and here's the document to prove it. That's one thing. When you're challenging to keep him off ballots, when you're running this bare knuckle campaign to run him out, as opposed to just saying, look, you're an incumbent president. It's fine. They were so scared of this idea that nobody who's been primaried, wins a presidency, without getting to the point of like, well, why? Why are you in this situation? You just need to rise to the occasion, demonstrate why you're better. Eventually RFK is going to endorse you. That's the way it goes. You don't have to ruin their lives. You don't have to really chase them across the street. They were nasty to Dean Phillips. They were nasty to RFK Jr. Marianne Williamson is Marianne Williamson. So she's, I feel like she operates in her own zone.
Right.
But like, these were brutal tactics. And if somebody comes up and tries to seize control of the party, they're going to find a lot of those same things. Now, can somebody overtake the power structure like Obama did? Mm-hmm. Maybe, but
or Clinton did in 92.
Or Clinton did, or Carter did, or Kennedy did. I mean, again, this is the lineage of this is clear. Somebody comes in and crushes the ossified old guard. That's what the Democrats do. Now, it turned out to be what the Republicans did. Republicans used to be the orderly party. That used to be, all right, you're 12 You start volunteering for the young
Right.
Republicans. Then you go to the right school that gets you into the right thing. And then you run for state legislature. And then you run for Congress. And then you run for Senate. And then eventually you'll get one shot at president. And everything is in a deli ticket order. That's that. And then Trump came in, upset everything. That's what the Democrats need to do. They're overdue for it. And if you really want to go back into the lore, the most damaging thing that could have happened to the Democratic Party is that the Obamas and the Clintons made peace. If the Obamas and the Clintons don't make peace, and Hillary is not the Secretary of State and is not in a situation where she can run again and is not in a situation where they feel that like, all right, we got to go with her over Biden, then you might have a rough 2016 and maybe Donald Trump wins either way. But at least now you've cleared the deck to say, okay, let's go. Who wants the brass ring? Who's going to step up and get it? So I agree with you. History says the Democrats will take the House. We will have Speaker Hakeem Jeffries.
And we'll have a new era of good feelings.
Yeah. Well, but that's the other thing is that it's like, you know, the best thing Hakeem Jeffries could say as he runs up to the midterms is when we get in, we're not worried about impeachments. We're worried about putting common sense legislation up that is going to advance the American people. Because that's the thing that I think is going to be the same old that's going to hurt the Democratic nominee in 28 is if it's just the same stuff where it's like, okay, now we're going to impeach him for the Qatar jet. Right. Who cares? Who honestly cares about the provenance of a stopgap Air Force One? Like, what does that do for your dinner table?
That does not put money in my pocket or food on the table here.
No.
And that's what, Democrats love fighting the last war more than any other party. And I think that's, we're about 5-ish months into the new administration now, a little bit, over 4. And I'm just thinking about what has been the response from the official party apparatus from the DNC on down. And it's been really lacking. I mean, the biggest news we have coming out of the DNC besides the election of Ken Martin is this David Hogg infighting over primary incumbents here. What are we hearing from the
Hogg wrangling?
Hogg wrangling. They're getting the whole hog right now. Yeah. What are we hearing from the D-Trip? What are we hearing from the DS? The people who are investing the most right now and have the most to crow about are the DLCC and the DGA, who got really involved in that Wisconsin Supreme Court race right now. So again, if we look at this top-heavy structure that the Democrats have encased themselves in this official party infrastructure, they haven't been giving their base or their people much to cheer about right now. But then the second that because of this two-party system we have and the seesaw just falls down the other way, they're going to get handed the keys to the House and they're going to start trying to impeach Trump on day one. There's going to be more Shree impeachment articles. Al Green's going to file something crazy as well.
Yes.
And we're just going to be doing this song and dance. And that's why when we think again past 26 to 28, I think you're absolutely right that whoever is going to emerge from that primary is going to be from outside this infrastructure right now. And they got to come in and be that scavenger and come in and take out the leadership and take it over, because the ones that we have right now in this party are huge trust gap with their voters, aren't putting out a path forward, and are going to be completely relitigating the last war instead of looking forward.
Have you read Fight and Original Sin?
I have not read Original Sin yet. I actually went to the bookstore last week to grab it, and they were sold out. So I'm going to try to get it this week.
DC.
Congratulations. I went to Kramer's, which is probably the worst place to go for that book, like 2 days after it released. But I've been reading all the excerpts, and it does seem like
get the audiobook. Jake Tapper does a Biden impression, which I thought was a little vaudeville for a very serious book. But
all right, never mind. I'm getting that. I'm sold.
Yeah. One of the themes in both those books is the term gaslighting. And it's very big at the end of Fight, which is the best book about Kamala World, if you're interested about that 100 days and what was going on inside that campaign. And what you find out when you put Original Sin and you put Fight together is literally nothing changed. They had the same problems, institutional problems that Biden world had that got them into this mess, that Kamala world had. And look, Kamala was a low ceiling candidate. I still think she's a low ceiling candidate, but the machine had problems. And here's the thing, Kirk. And when you're like, all right, are we overrating the doomsaying here? Mm-hmm. What I would say to the counterpoint is that they haven't learned. Like even in that New York Times article, there's this refrain and you hear Democrats say it. Well, Trump and the economy and the tariffs, his approval numbers are way down. We think we really have an opening. Go to the aggregate. That was last month. Right. Yesterday's price is not today's price. He's up. There's stuff that's coming out today that has him above water on the economy. This was a dip that wound up going back. And it's like, okay, he's gonna eventually be up on the stock market because it seems to be responding to the trade deals. He's got several trade deals that he's going to announce that's going to buoy the market. We're going to see more positive things economically in most likely. If you are just waiting for Godot on higher prices that's gonna be the issue here. There's a literary reference for anybody who's tired of us making sports references.
I was about to say we're covering the waterfront here right now. Men contain multitudes. We got the Knicks similes. We got outkicking the coverage. We got existential dread. We're complex people. There's a reason they're investing $20 million in talking to us.
See, men are complicated too. We're not just barking dogs looking at bikini girls and box scores. We contain multitudes too.
This is what you're missing if you're just listening to the manosphere here right now.
We're not just promo code dude wipes. But like that's, if you're just waiting for the economy to suck, it's not a plan. Hope is not a plan. And I said this on the Substack episode on Sunday. You want to know what you haven't heard? Any elected Democrat, any big Democrat that has a megaphone right now talk about? Abortion. What is their post-Roe plan? They need a post-Roe plan. And it can't just be, we'll bring Roe back. Because guess what? The first time that you're going to be able to do that, theoretically, the soonest would be in 28. So you're basically telling women who have treated this as a life or death issue that not only did you not do anything since 22, it's 25 now. You're not going to do anything for another 3 years. Mm-hmm. So if you want a thing now to talk about that the Republicans desperately want to get away from, they never feel comfortable talking about this.
No.
Talk about a post-Roe. What is the post-Roe world? We have yet to see a Democrat elucidate that. They've owned that issue my entire life. And I've heard more conversations about whether or not the dude in El Salvador is a gangbanger than Roe, than abortion.
Protecting the right to abortion access. And it's not like there isn't stuff going on here with that. I mean, I believe it was yesterday, Missouri paused all abortions because of a court ruling. Now, if you'll recall, in November, voters overwhelmingly passed a ballot measure to codify abortion access. But the Republican-controlled legislature there is saying, hey, not so fast. Did the voters really know what they were talking about?
Yeah.
So they've been trying to slow walk the implementation of the ballot measure. They've gummed it up in the courts, and now they have a GOP-sponsored ballot measure coming out next November that is going to ban all abortions. It's less in the case of rape and incest and a certain time frame right now. This is insane that the state legislature in Missouri is willfully at odds with what the voters overwhelmingly supported. How many Democrats do you think are talking about that right now?
Zero that I've seen. There are two topics that I see mentioned in Democratic circles that are never talked about by elected Democrats who are by and large chasing the Trump fart of the moment. One of them is abortion, which is very much still on the mind of grassroots Democratic conversation. And the two, less flattering to them, is that Donald Trump stole the election and that Elon Musk changed the votes with Starlink. There is a Blue Anon thread.
I do not know about this Blue Anon.
Oh, go on Reddit. Something's wrong 2024 and look at the upvotes on it. It's like 7,000 upvotes per post on this thing. There is a QAnon-sized movement within the Democratic electorate about this. Now, I was of the opinion that QAnon was not that big of a thing and that it was overblown by the media. I tend to think that this is probably not as covered as, it's not as covered. I don't think it necessarily needs to be. It is a thing that I see. And I do believe we're going to get blue anon candidates in some of these House races, at least in the primaries. But those are two of the things that are just not touched. And the fact that abortion's on that list is insane to me.
The whole reason that, and you and I can disagree on this, but I think the whole reason that Biden decided that he was going to run for re-election is Democrats' overperformance in the midterms in 22. Yes, they lost the House, but they expanded the Senate majority by 1 on the back of the Dobbs ruling, which abortion became everything. It was an abortion election. Biden misread it and thought it was a referendum on his first 2 terms in office. It wasn't. Harris tried to lean into that a little bit on the final stretch of the campaign, but it has all but disappeared now. And so,
because they don't have a message.
They don't.
The message was restore Roe. Cool.
How are we going to do that now? How are they going to do that now?
How are you going to do that then? I mean, that was my thing. That was my thing then, was that it's like, rad, dude. When? How? Like, you guys were the last people to have a shot to do it, and you didn't.
Correct.
With Obama. Like, so now it's going to happen? Like, you have no other plan?
This time we'll do it. Again, it's that trust gap that we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Is that they had an opportunity to do it. They didn't. And now that they're trying to reclaim those voters again. I am really curious, though, besides, toying with the idea that we might be overblowing the state of the Democrats in disarray right now. This isn't like, 88 when they just got completely shellacked everywhere. But I also wonder, like, do you feel shades of post-2012 Republicans here right now? You remember the Time magazine cover that talked about, is this the end of the Republican Party? They had that big after action report where they talked about how we need to change how we're talking to Hispanic and Latino voters. We need to take a more softer stance on immigration. 4 years later, who are they nominating? The guy who's calling Mexicans rapists and criminals, that they're bringing drugs, they're bringing the worst parts. And a guy who just, again, to what we were talking about earlier, this outsider, this marauder come in and just wipe out a whole leadership class of the Republican Party, going the complete opposite direction that the strategist said the party should take. So as we're looking at this, doubling down on figuring out how to talk to men, and trying to do away with the groups, but elevate other groups that we're losing with. Is there room for someone to come in and just, for lack of a better word, just lib the hell out here?
There's not just room, it's a necessity. And I don't know whether or not, I don't think that it's an ideological thing personally. I could very much see it being an incredibly charismatic progressive, as I could see it being a centrist, a Democrat who hates environmentalism, for example. Let's say that it's somebody who's just like, you want to know what? The biggest problem we've ever had is environmentalism. It stops us from building the things we need. I'm pro trains. I'm anti-green, right?
Paper straws are destroying our way of life.
Sure. Like, I could see any number of them. Here's the one thing that I do know. They will come into my life shredding Joe Biden.
Yes.
It is the biggest piñata that is spilling candy there. It is waiting for somebody to destroy it. I have been saying this since before he dropped out of the race in 24. This is your shot. You will be rewarded. But here's the difference that I would say with the Republicans in 2012 versus the Democrats now. The Republicans in 2012, very much just totally out of it, right? But they found the Tea Party. And the Tea Party was something that had a grassroots movement. There were people that were very mad, and they wound up putting people into office. And so you found it wasn't a conflagration, and it had a long way to go, but it was a spark. Anger meets policy, meets politician, meets electoral success.
Right.
This is the through line of the business, right? Like, this is how you win. You find the thing, you get the solution, you find the person that's going to implement it, you get into positions of power.
Right.
What I don't see right now is you got Bernie and AOC out there that are drawing big crowds to fight oligarchy. Okay. You've got the anger. Where's the policy? Where are the people? Right. What kind of movement are you starting? And that's great that they got the crowds, but now are Bernie and AOC going to be endorsing a slate of candidates? Mm-hmm. Are they going to be involved in these primaries? Are they going to say, if you are an oligarch fighter, name it whatever you want, you need to have these qualifications? These are the things that everybody in that crowd can agree with? I don't know. That to me is what needs to happen. And that's right. At least for whatever, as much as the Republicans were in disarray in the Obama era, they found that and they wound up finding it pretty quickly.
Right. Well, I know that Bernie has started to endorse a few candidates here. I know he's endorsed in the Michigan Senate race, a few House races, open House races as well. But it's not like there's a Democratic Project 2029 right now that's authored by AOC and Bernie. There's no game plan. They see the truck they're chasing, but they don't know what to do, or they haven't talked about what they're going to do when they catch the truck. Yeah. And it's, again, maybe I'm like reassessing in real time my idea that they're not as deep in the wilderness as I think right now, but there's just no signature platform or signature plan right now besides we want to save Medicaid. We want to preserve SNAP benefits. We want to make sure that the federal work that we have to preserve USAID.
The Medicaid thing, they're on their heels on that. Right. I mean, like our friend Bill Scher, his column now is, waste, fraud, and abuse is a lie. That means you're defending. That means that the Republicans are winning on that argument because you feel that you need to argue against it because you have a broken trust with the people that when you say that Medicaid is being destroyed, they don't believe you. They are believing Mike Johnson, which is insane because you're losing your core issues. If Democrats can't defend on abortion, Social Security, and Medicaid, then for real, we should start talking about another leftward party. Because if you can't do that, then you are doing generational damage to what has been built before. You are totally ripping out the narrative. Donald Trump's a very different candidate than Ronald Reagan, but people who voted for Ronald Reagan could see themselves, the boomers that voted for Reagan could see themselves voting for Trump. There was at least some kind of through line of the man for his time. Where's that now?
It's not here on the Democratic side. It's not here on the Democratic side at all. And I think, again, they might kick the can down the road with these lessons that we're talking about because they're going to put together another string of nice special election performances here. It looks like Abigail Spanberger is probably going to win in the Virginia governor's race. And they might even
keep the streak alive.
Yeah, they might even streak all the statewide races given the particulars of Virginia right now. New Jersey looks to be at right now, a few weeks before the primary, in Democrats' hands. They can coast on those wins and ideas that, look, we're actually not as bad as we thought we were. Then have a fine enough midterm, but put off this conversation of what are we offering instead of just we need to run away from Trump.
If you spend 2 years impeaching Trump again, it will be a bad thing for them, in my opinion. It is going to be spinning your wheels. Okay. Let's real quick, because we came on the liberal Joe Rogan. I think that's a dumb idea. They're focusing on Joe Rogan because Joe Rogan is the thing that they feel turned the election, when really the problem was fly Kamala down for a day and let her sit there and talk for 3 hours. If she can't talk for 3 hours, then maybe she's not the candidate. You should be finding candidates that can go on Joe Rogan as opposed to somebody who will read the talking points like a trained animal. Here's what I think the Democrats need. A liberal Rush Limbaugh. Somebody that pushes policy and drives fear into politicians that are not carrying a standard. The Republicans have had that And they still do in varying different, there's no one Rush Limbaugh, but there's plenty of Charlie Kirks and there's plenty of Ben Shapiro's and there's plenty of people that push various elements of the coalition in certain directions. Who is that on the left?
Would it be the abundance guys?
I mean, they're new. They have a book to push. They don't do anything regularly. I mean, they both produce their own content, but they're not. I mean, I don't know. Is anybody scared of Ezra Klein? Is anyone scared of Derek Thompson? Because they were scared of Rush.
You're right. It does seem like Ezra Klein, though, does have some sort of vaulted space in the Democratic world. It's not the pod save guys, obviously. But it does seem like if you're looking for idea guys, you could do a lot worse than someone like Ezra Klein right now.
Yeah.
But this is, I think, the problem, the bigger problem than Democrats. It's like, again, we're layering problems on them.
Yep.
Is that they constantly think it's a messaging problem and not a substance problem. You know,
yes.
Ken Martin, the new DNC chair, talked about that all the time. He talked about how there was, I have the exact quote right here, that it was a broken message system, he said, when he first got elected, and that they were just having trouble communicating with, again, going back to what we said at the top of the show here, messaging people like you or me. So that's why they need to go into these Joe Rogan spaces. That's why they need to start advertising in video games. That's why they need to break into this manosphere, because if they could just get in front of these people, then they'll sure to win them over. Yeah. When really, from what we've been talking about for the last little bit, it's a substance problem. It's you don't have anything to offer here. So when you get in those rooms and you can't have that conversation, you can't say what you're for, or if you're Pete Buttigieg and you look back at 5 years ago with rose-tinted glasses and see the glide path forward without engaging in the muck and substance of what was going on, then we're not going to believe you. Then that trust gap is not going to get narrowed. It's only going to grow. It's not a getting in the room problem. It's getting in the room and having something to sell.
I would also say that it is a messaging problem for them. I agree with everything you've said. But part of that, the idea that you can bumper sticker your way through it, is a messaging strategy. Less is more is a Democratic strategy. That's part of the reason I think this wasn't in Original Sin, but this is a underreported part of why they were able to hide Biden is because the Democratic playbook is less is more. That they want to hide. When they had somebody that could talk like Kamala, they still hit her because they were like, don't make a mistake. Don't make a mistake. Don't make a mistake. Rather that every word be exactly perfect. And A, that's not the media environment we're living in. B, you're not that good. Kamala wasn't that good. Biden wasn't that good.
Walz wasn't that good.
Walz certainly was not that good. The knucklehead.
That debate performance. Woof.
You need a lot of surface area. And so if I were to say the liberal Rush Limbaugh, and this is going to come with a lot of baggage, but Rush came with a lot of baggage at times, it's Hassan Abi on Twitch.
Ooh.
I think he has loyal followers.
Yes.
If he got more access, look, you have to ride with all of it. You have to ride with the fact that he's going to say some off-color stuff. Every once in a while, he's going to out and out support Hamas. Like there's going to be things that you're not going to like about it. But if you want economic populism from the left, if you want an unapologetically liberal voice, he's that right now. Now, does that mean that your party's in a healthy place? Probably not. But the one thing that the Democrats are in short supply on is passion. People they feel despair. They feel anger, but they don't feel passion for a thing. And if there's one thing that you can say about the Hassan Abi phenomenon is that his fans are passionate. Right. I don't know how much you win with it, but if you want somebody that at least brings chaos to an ossified order that is not helping anybody, he's going to bring chaos to it. Now, I don't think that Hassan Abi is a great candidate, but if you're looking for a person to break rocks, he moves.
I think what we're running up against here when we're trying to cash cast the liberal Rush Limbaugh, which I think is a much more interesting way to think about this than liberal Joe Rogan, because again, that's Joe Rogan, is that there's a big divide on the Democratic Party that doesn't exist in the Republican Party, and that's over Israel, and that's over the war in Gaza right now, where there isn't a similar divide on a whole lot of issues in the Republican Party. You might maybe think about foreign intervention, maybe, especially in terms of like Ukraine or America's place in the world. We can look at the divide between the neocons and the MAGA folk, but there's no issue that gets the divides in the Democratic Party as riled up as what we're saying, as energized, as support for Israel. And I think that is going to be a big dividing line as we think of any sort of uniting factor in the Democratic Party. You think about the only members of Congress on the Democratic side who lost renomination last year, who lost primaries, were the more progressive ones who ran afoul of the more centrist support for Israel. It was Jamal Bowman and Cori Bush, and they had AIPAC, DMFI just dropped millions of dollars on them. That's probably going to play out again with some more progressive lawmakers, not just incumbents, but in some of these open primaries as well. And I think as we think of who can be that uniting voice for the party, or the voice that people fear in the party, they're going to need to figure out some way to bridge that divide over supporting Israel within the party.
I mean, do they? Look, the Republicans right now, if we're going to say that the Democrats are in the wilderness, then we're going to say that the Republicans figured something out. And it's not like Steve Bannon and Ben Shapiro get along. It's not like that a lot of these people that go back and forth, that they agree on everything. Sometimes they disagree vociferously, and they fight with each other, and they scream with each other, and their fan bases go back and forth, and they call each other names. And then at the end, they all voted for Trump.
But
so it's like
Trump is the Death Star, though. I mean, Trump is the super weapon that everybody is afraid of within the party. That there can be internal squabbles about the role of Ukraine, about Doge, about the Medicaid cuts. Yeah. But at the end of the day, everybody is orbiting around Trump, and that's no moon. That's the Death Star. It is, and he is able to obliterate
sci-fi
anyone within the party. See, look, we got sports, we got literature, we got Star Wars.
Come on, man.
Democrats. We'll do it for 10
Western
million.
man?
We'll do it for
Which
10
way?
million.
Kirk Bado, Hotline. Thank you so much for joining us.
Justin, sir, great to be with you, as always.
This is your update brought to you by politics.com. TakePoliticsSeriously.com. It's where you support us. It all goes to the same place. It's our Substack. Look, I'm on the beach. Literally. If you are only listening to this, trust me, it is a gorgeous day here on Fort Lauderdale Beach, the 954, fully representing. And to be totally honest with you, I was just going to tell Will, our producer, just run an old ending thing where I say all the stuff at the end. We don't really need to do it. In fact, I'm still going to do that. I'm going to tell Will, just run an ending thing at the end where it says all the stuff that we normally say. In fact, I'll do that now. There have been many insults and many compliments that have been sent to me on Venmo. Everybody's doing their own bits. One guy is sending me 1 cent at a time, but you'll get my donation links there. The reason why I am out here on the beach working is because I can't deny you guys an update. Because we've done the hokey pokey and we've turned ourselves around, and that's what it's all about. And what we are talking about is Trump's Liberation Day tariffs. This is what happens after I do the Substack episode. After that, there's a 3-judge ruling that says Donald Trump does not have the IEPA authority to unilaterally put tariffs on countries. IEPA is a 70s era law that essentially says that in an era of national emergency, you can put tariffs on whatever country you want. Donald Trump has said we're in a national emergency, and so now my Liberation Day tariffs are in there. Very obviously, he is using it as bargaining. At this point, he does not believe that we are in a situation where we need to have these high tariffs, and we know that because he's pulled almost all of them down or paused them, and he is in negotiation. But you essentially erode all of his negotiation juice if you say that he doesn't have the authority to do it. Now, all of a sudden, those phone calls are going to get answered a lot slower from the European Union, from Japan, from India. We've heard India's closed. I've heard Australia's closed. You're not going to get those same calls. And I think Trump was kind of in a bit of a rock and a hard place. Stock surged on the news. And then, as I am about to, I've landed here. I'm like, oh, okay, I probably got to record, but it's iffy. Then we get the other news. An appellate court reverses the first court. And so now Donald Trump does have the ability to levy the IEEPA tariffs. I don't know if any of this particularly matters for anything that's happening in the Senate right now. I do believe it matters for his trade deals. So I'm going to give you my thought on what is going to happen. Deals quickly. That's what I believe is going to happen. I believe that the thought that this is going to go away, that maybe it gets the Supreme Court. Supreme Court has backed Trump at sometimes, but hasn't always. Maybe you got some of these partners that see the opportunity to say, all right, what do you say? Take it or leave it this. And I think the Trump White House might be more into taking it. Now, this is not my area of expertise. I am honestly just like floating it from the seat of my pants, but that is what I expect. And that's just going to be your update here. We got long interviews of Bado. We got an interview with Katherine Dee. Let's go ahead over there to that. But you can get 2 bonus episodes of this show each and every week if you head to takepoliticsseriously.com. Thank you very much for everybody who supports us. As you saw, I'm here because of my mom. It's her retirement party. But we grew up in South Florida, so it means that I'm on the beach in Fort Lauderdale. So, like I'm not on like a vacation. Anyway, I don't need to justify it to you. I love you. Here's Katherine Dee.
Very happy to be joined by Katherine Dee of default.blog, one of my favorite reads on Substack, and somebody that I very much believe is a part of covering internet culture that I think is sorely undercovered, if not miscovered in general in the media. So it is a pleasure to talk with you. Welcome to the show, Katherine.
Thanks for having me.
Now, the reason why you most recently caught my attention was because of an incredibly sad story, but it is part of the reason why I think a lot of this coverage is really important, mostly because this is where culture lives. Strange, weird, sometimes even violent subcultures don't exist in trending topics. They don't exist in physical spaces often. They exist in subcultures and comment sections and discords. And so that is where we find ourselves in discussing the IVF bombing a few weeks ago and the subculture that led to it. I always mispronounce what the subculture is called. So I would greatly appreciate a pronunciation guide here.
Ephilism.
Ephilism. Can you please tell us about ephilism?
Ephilism is a sort of a quirky subset of antinatalism. Although the founder, this very strange YouTuber who is mostly known by his handle in Mendham, because he's in Mendham, New Jersey, says that he is not an antinatalist. It is life spelled backwards. And they are a sentiocentric brand of antinatalism. So that means that they think all sentience, all consciousness is suffering. So it's not enough to stop procreating. They are anti-life. And so the name comes from, it's a play on lifeism, right? So they're against all life. And I think they've been pretty misrepresented. uh, they're a pretty tough group to describe accurately.
Yeah. Well, because and we've seen a lot of this recently with some of the, there was the conversation, we can get into the Zizians in a second, but that was another big thing that kind of broke into the mainstream. But there is an element of rationalization that comes along to justifying murder. It seems like this worldview is one that is almost predicated on it, that the greatest gift you could do to something is to end its life.
Yes, but they're not pro murder. They're not homicidal.
Okay.
What ends up happening is crazy people are attracted to these ideas. And like recently, someone brought to my attention a YouTuber did like a 4-hour live stream about how he thought ephilism was for right, and that's his verbiage, not mine, because they aren't homicidal.
Gotcha.
A lot of the death that exists in sort of the ethicist ideology is hypothetical, and it's not helped by the fact that Mendham is, I mean, just a really cranky, weird old guy, and he'll have these outbursts. So the guy who created this philosophy has over 10,000 YouTube videos. That, like, tens of thousands of hours of him just shouting into this like pixelated webcam, right? And he'll say insane shit, like really crazy stuff. And it's really easily picked out. But if you like lurk in like an ethicist Discord server or on their now banned subreddit, I mean, they're not encouraging murder. What they are is they're pro euthanasia, very vocal about right to die. Many of them are suicidal. And it's inviting for people who are looking for post hoc rationalizations for acts of violence. I think there is like a very sound argument to be made, like that it's almost irresponsible because of course it's going to attract crazy people. And it's a really slippery slope. Well, like how can you be anti-life and then argue against murder? Right. It gets very dicey. But the core members are actually nonviolent.
Well, and that's the biggest reason why I think I very much enjoy your work. And I think that discussions around these communities demand nuance, because in general, when you're talking about online communities, you're mostly talking about people who want to talk online and the weird ideas that they have, be they philosophical or sexual or whatever. Like, you are finding exactly what you want to talk about. But in general, historically, it is all talk. It is 99.999% talk with certain elements kind of breaking through. And obviously you want to be aware when they cross into illegal territories, but it's just because you have an incredibly dark, sick ideology that might lead to something like a cheering on somebody ending their lives or even what happened with the IVF bombing. It doesn't mean that the community itself is, because of participation, involved in it. Or at least if we're going to walk down that line, I think it's a nuanced conversation and not just something that you want to paint with a broad brush.
Right. Like, I think that there's like a very easy sort of like clickbait angle that's like, oh, this should be outlawed. Like, these people are encouraging acts of violence. And in one way that it is true. In another way, it's not. Another like closely related story is the website Sanctioned Suicide, which is a forum for suicidal people who don't necessarily want to recover, who do want to, carry through an act of suicide, to discuss. And the problem there is predators infiltrated. And there were people who were doing these sort of like virtual homicides where they would send people poisons to carry out the act. And this was a huge scandal, particularly in the UK. And there's a Canadian man, I'm blanking on his name, I apologize, who recently was arrested because he was sending people sodium nitrite, which is it's a preservative in meats. But when, taken in the wrong quantities, you die. It's poison. There's other predatory groups that infiltrate these like high risk discussion forums. And in other cases, there are groups that will edge people on to or egg people on rather to commit acts of violence.
Yeah.
And there's many different groups that these things, occur in. Recently, there's been like a huge crackdown on one predatory group called 764. And they were targeting at-risk minors and getting them to self-harm, to commit acts of violence. There have been several school shootings and other mass casualty events connected to this group. And what they do is they look for things like sanctioned suicide or maybe spin-off F-list Discord servers or the true crime community, which is actually a euphemistic way to describe people who are fans of school shooters, which is a whole other rabbit hole. And they're like, okay, these are usually minors, or they're highly depressed people, or they're people who are easily influenced. What can we make them do?
Yeah.
And it's under discussed. And the nuance here is like, well, who's to blame? Is it the community that would have otherwise been nonviolent? Is it the at-risk people who aren't properly chaperoned somehow? Obviously the predators have the most accountability here, but it's a complicated situation.
This kind of gets into a larger conversation with internet stuff because, part of, there was a big dump of information that came out yesterday of the Trump shooter, Matthew Crooks, and there were emails that he had sent and stuff like that. But by and large, the understanding that we have had from a media perspective is that he didn't really have a gigantic footprint in terms of the conversation that he had in the way that we traditionally look at stuff. And I have no reason to disbelieve that, but I do have reason to believe that these conversations are not happening in forums that are traditionally kind of online. They're largely in Discords or in private servers that a lot of this stuff is happening. So from your perspective as somebody who just watches and covers this in general, how much would you say, the conversations that people are having in a modern online context are happening in publicly available comment sections, for example, versus these private communities that are largely outside of a trackable eye and can be deleted at a moment?
It's actually happening in both forums, right? There's a lot of stuff that happens in DM groups or in Discord servers. Discord is particularly challenging, right? There's a lot of good things that happen on Discord. Plenty of people use it sort of as intended, or to organize or, whatever. But there's a lot of, what it is, it attracts a lot of young people who are using it ostensibly because they're playing games or whatever. And that attracts pedophiles and other types of predators. So it's a pretty challenging platform. But the thing is, people who end up committing these acts of violence, something I've seen, and I don't have statistics on this, it's just anecdotal, they do have this sort of public facing footprint. They have, they're live streaming to no one, right? They're dropping hints. They're saying very violent things in public. Elias Rodriguez, who murdered 2 staffers in front of the Israeli embassy. I believe it was last Saturday. I mean, he had a very public facing, footprint. He was very open in not just anti-Zionism and for the anti-colonialism and for the pro-Palestine movement, but openly violent iterations of it. I think the scariest thing is that this is never, it's so rarely like, oh, we didn't see it coming. He was just a nice guy, nice, normal guy. I mean, there's both private and public receipts. And it's just, it's hard to know what to take seriously. It's hard to know which red flags to clock. I mean, something else I've been very vocal on is people will post provocative content, not necessarily to foreshadow what they're planning to do or what they would like to do, but to gatekeep people out of their communities or to show allegiance to particular subcultures. And then so the question is, well, then who is the true danger to the community and who isn't? And should it matter at this point of physical world violence? Should we just
can you give me an example of that of
Sure.
Posting things to gatekeep?
So in like certain right wing, like far hard right, communities, people will post anything from gore to racial slurs to something
Gotcha.
maybe more mild, like I hate women, and they don't literally mean it, and they don't literally like wish, like they don't necessarily seek out like gore videos in their own time, right?
Yeah.
It's it's
Gore
because
for the olds that are listening are violent images, but what you would think of as, people getting run over or shot or killed
Right.
or stuff like that.
Right. Any number, another thing that they'll post a lot is provocative images of animated children, which is sort of, it's very disturbing. And it's not that they're necessarily pedophiles, right? It's because these spaces, one, are watched by journalists, two, are potentially watched by feds, three, are watched by people who want to make money and who look for communities that they can monetize. And so all three of these groups, they want, well, maybe they're sort of attracting the feds by doing this, but they're trying to tell other people like, we don't want some, young woman who is going to, use us for her $7 a month Substack subscription, right? Like it's a way to keep people out. And there's many reasons why you might want to keep people out. Sometimes it's folks who are too soft, right? And
gotcha. They don't want anybody complaining about the things that they want to talk about, and so therefore you have to walk past this horrifying thing that would, for an outside community would mark them as just total reprobates, and so they're allowed to do whatever they want inside their little clubhouse.
Yes.
Oh man, it is such an intense universe when it comes to the extreme elements of it. I don't want to just have you here so we can talk about awful and violent and horrifying things. What would you say is an example of some of these communities that obviously have used their powers for good as opposed for evil?
I mean, a lot of subcultures are now moving into the physical world, just to hang out, and I will say that like a lot of loneliness has been alleviated. There's a lot in like the Twitter ecosystem, which is where I've paid the most attention. One is a spinoff of Silicon Valley rationalist groups. It's called Teapot, or this part of Twitter. Your listeners may be familiar with it because the United Healthcare assassin Luigi Mangione was erroneously assumed to be part of it. But they have something called Vibe Camp, which is a sort of amateur, at this point not even amateur, but it started as sort of like an amateur Burning Man. And it's people who were engaging in these discussions, meeting up at a campsite, and it grew and it grew and it grew, and it's huge now. I think like there's 1,000 people who go, and it's things like that. And I'm seeing more and more of these in-person meetups, for better and for worse. Like sometimes it's violent, or it's kind of underpinned by some sort of heinous ideology. But other times it's just people who are friends online who are like, tweeting at one another, or being in the DM group or on Telegram or Discord isn't enough. Let's do something. Let's create.
Let's
something.
all get together.
Yeah. And there's another group called Fractal in New York City. They have classes, and they're expanding, so people can open up their own sort of like informal campuses. So there's like quite a few promising things going on.
Yeah, I'm an unflagging internet optimist. I very much believe that it has made us better. It has made us more connected. I do think that we need to look at it realistically, in that the greatest thing and the worst thing the internet did was eliminate geographical boundaries as to our social lives. And so now, great, you were the nerdy kid who got picked on. Now you don't have to live your entire life at the judgment of the people that you grew up next to or you were born next to. You can find your communities online. But at the same time, sometimes that does, when you're locked into that, create a loneliness problem, because you are now only happy when you are staring at a screen, which is not the most nurturing thing to do in the world if you are not supplementing it with other stuff. So I am always going to believe that this will bring us to a better place. But it is oftentimes a hairy position to hold on to when you see some of the communities that spurred up and say like, well, I mean, I'm just assuming that all this happened in meat space before. We just didn't have the receipts, and that's what's jarring.
Or we did have the receipts,
us.
and we're selectively forgetting it. Like a couple of weeks ago, my sister and I were watching a documentary on Heaven's Gate.
Yeah,
and I mean they were at it for 20 years or something before the incident. You know,
exactly. Yeah. Oh, I think I saw it. There was the one on Netflix.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was an insane documentary to look at how long that went. And I mean, and even, counterculture movements of all stripes. That was part of the reason why, the hippie movement of the 60s kind of was forever changed by the Manson murders, because there were darker elements that eventually kind of came to the fore in a very, very dark version of what was portrayed as a near harmless expression of the youth. And I do think that some of what we see now in terms of internet subcultures reminds me of counterculture movements of the past. If you look at it and say like, oh, okay, well, people want to find like-minded vision when they feel lonely or lost. And sometimes that's great. Sometimes everybody gets together and we all learn a lesson and you're friends forever. And it's, an amazing time. And sometimes it's, Heaven's Gate or the Manson family or the, IVF bomber.
I totally agree with you. I think part of the reason it feels novel, I mean, I will say, people are theoretically exposed to much worse content. It's the barrier to entry for all sorts of extremes has been lowered, and that's a big difference. But also, I think we think of the internet. We had for some reason we sort of haven't updated our priors from the 90s, where it was this rarefied group who is very online. We always think of the internet as somehow very far away from us. But they're very online. They are doing it, not us, not me. We're all very online.
Yes.
We're online in different ways. But I was just reflecting on my blog. I go to the library or the playground, and it's not iPad kids that I see. It's parents who are just glued to their phone, who are like, okay, my kid's at the library. This is my opportunity to play a mobile game or something. Yeah.
I'll tell you what, I have that problem now. I have a 9-month-old daughter, and she goes for me and my wife's phone because she sees us on it all the time. Yeah. And it's like, I now am like, okay, well, how do I walk this line between being as connected as I need to be for my job, but also not just zoning out and doom scrolling? What is that line? I still think that
it's really hard.
It is. And I've consistently, and this is bordered on copium at times whenever things get hairy in my internet optimist position, but I always kind of consistently say, look, we're still at an adolescent phase with this. We're still trying to understand what this technology is to us, what it does. Our generation, and I was of a generation that, was an instant message generation, as a kid, we're still finding out how fast this thing can go before we even realize how to use it responsibly.
Yeah, I think you're right. And something that I've struggled with myself is you can be an internet optimist and still criticize it.
Yes.
And I think that there is been such a backlash, partially because it just makes money. Right. I think that commercialization is sort of not the root of all evil, but it has caused quite a few problems with, especially internet discourse. You can make so much money just saying, well, social media or the internet or our smartphones are the root of all evil. And then for me, I have this contrarian response where I want to be almost belligerently pro-internet because I hate the tone.
Let's
go.
This other group is I'm with you. I know that feeling.
Right? It's so annoying. But then you come back down to earth and you're like, all right, I can say that social media has, had measurable harms against society without adopting this sort of uncritical anti-internet stance.
Yeah. And I think part of it is that when you're invested in being a disruptor to culture, and I think anybody who was part of social media at a time when it was really exciting then you see any criticism of the internet in the way that you saw it when it first started, which is, no, the old way was better. It was better before X, Y, and Z. That's why I had the same. Yeah, it's so funny. When I was living in the Bay Area, this is maybe 9 years ago, the detox camps were becoming a very popular thing. So it was like, oh, go to summer camp and, your phone's away. And then everybody would come back and like, oh, we finger painted and we sat in a circle and we banged a drum. And I'm like, oh, you guys are the worst. You guys, I'm just going to be on my phone more now because I don't want to be like you. And now it's like, you want to know what? I do just need a flip phone sometimes. I do just need to basically make my phone a brick so I don't reflexively, whenever I am 2 seconds into being bored, go and re-scroll the feed that I already know everything that's going to be said on it.
Yeah, I very much the same. And what was interesting is I also lived in the Bay Area around the same time. Like reflecting on it, I was often like too busy to be too on my phone, and so were like many of the people I was friends with. And it was like all theoretical. It was like this really weird thing where it was like, I'm like working too much to be like scrolling or, being like checked out. But I still this very like defensive, like, how dare you? Like, Twitter's great. Twitter made my career,
Yeah. But I mean, the reality is that there are differences. There are societal differences. There are cultural differences. And I don't know if there's easy answers to like, what do you do with these communities? Because on some level, I've thought a lot about like Ruby Ridge, for example. For whatever reason, I think a lot about Ruby Ridge. And part of the story of Ruby Ridge is that there's this racist on a mountain, and they bring him down because he's connected to these white supremacist groups, and they wind up enlisting him to entrap other white supremacists, and then it goes wrong, and then he gets charged, and the next thing you know, there's a stand-up on top of the mountain. But it always kind of boils down to this question for me of, what do you do with a racist on a mountain? If there's a racist on a mountain, and this guy is the worst, like he is saying things that are awful, that are actively like terrible for society. You wouldn't think that we get better if you listen to him talk, but he's on a mountain and he does not like coming down. He hates every time he has to come down to do anything. Is the best thing to just leave him there? And then what happens when that mountain's digital? What happens when it's like, all right, you have a bunch of really lonely people that are saying awful, degenerate things. What do you do? Where is the line of speech where you want to police it? Do you only police it when it metastasizes into something violent, or do you step in before? And I don't think that there's easy questions or answers to these questions.
It's really difficult. And I mean, I think there's also sort of a valid argument to be made about these communities growing and influencing people and just like, depleting their quality of life in different ways. And also like these people then go on to engage in public life. So, and you see it, you see it in both benign, and less benign subcultures. You surround yourself with a type of content often enough, right? It's going to affect your worldview somehow.
Yeah.
So that could be something positive, like learning a language. Or it could be something negative, like extremely like racist or sexist content that you're doing over and over and over again. And then you go into the workplace with, filled with resentment towards, members of the opposite sex.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think the other question is like, all right, well, where obviously nobody would describe that content as good for you. And what happens when you're surrounded with stuff and you don't know any better and you fall into a community like that and then you grow out of it? Because like you said, a lot of these communities, especially the most vile, these are kids. They're not all kids. Plenty of them are full-grown adults, but they wind up attracting people who are at incredibly confusing times in their lives, like adolescence. And you have, Is that a phase of life for which can be grown out of? I would assume so. Most things are, but does it permanently shape you? Does it permanently shape culture? Is the answer to restrict it? Is the answer to, create positive examples that create more places where people can funnel into? And I think the answer is probably everything. It's probably there are things that we need to restrict, and then there are things that we need to just understand. No, there need to be different buckets for people to fall into.
Restriction is such a slippery slope. I do these ethnographic interviews with people about how they use the internet. And the prompt is sort of looking for power users. I'm looking for people who are online a lot.
Yeah.
And something that has sort of reliably snapped people out of being too online is just having a more engaging physical life. So that could be having, getting your first girlfriend, or going to college, or joining a sports team, or one that an example I like to bring up a lot is living in a very busy city, right? So I was mentioning in the Bay Area, I was just too preoccupied with my commute, my job, my friends, whatever, to be sucked down the rabbit hole. The same thing is true. Like if you live in a place like New York and you're taking full advantage of it, people report to me again and again, I'm too distracted by what I need to do in the physical world to fall into this trance. And I think there's something to that. I don't know how that scales. I don't know what that looks like for as a fix, but I think that's a very valuable piece of information.
Yeah, that there has to be something physical to it. I guess that might be, if we're trying to figure out the universal theory of all of this within a half-hour period, that might be part of it, is that the internet is a part of your life. When it becomes all of your life, it can get dicey. It can get dangerous.
If you're not using your body enough, because then things you don't realize, you don't feel the physical sensation of I shouldn't do this, of shame, of guilt, of this is wrong, because you become so out of touch, you become anesthetized. You become or you're viewing too much violent imagery, so you become desensitized to it. You become desensitized in other ways too. A very old study was about people who would have affairs online. This is from the early 90s. Part of it was they didn't feel it was wrong in their body because they were online too much. They just they're in a trance or in another world. And I think that's another valuable piece of information. There's something about grounding yourself enough where you're able to be in touch with this emotional reaction to what you're viewing and doing on the internet.
This kind of gets into another thing, and I could probably talk to you for hours about this, but the line between a pseudonym or anonymous account versus having kind of your own name on it. And it's something that I've always, just because I'm ancient on internet terms, I've always just been my name. And I've gotten, whenever there's a new social media thing, I'll just get Justin R. Young because that's what I've had forever. But I wonder if it would have been different if I would have become, somebody that was known under a pseudonym, whether or not it would have emboldened different things. I know now that anything I say, and I think probably too much about everything that I say online, because I know this is me. This is my permanent record. I am writing this in permanent marker. Somebody's going to be I need to be comfortable pulling any old thing that I have said and knowing, all right, here's what I do to explain every moment of what I've done. And I'm fine with that. I'm very comfortable with, the fact that I've grown up online in so many ways. But at the same time, I don't know if I would have been untethered from my personal reputation if that would have changed, if I would have said wilder stuff, if I would have pushed into different communities, if I would have been free to do it. I don't think I would, but then again, it's hard to tell from this side of 40.
For me, for some reason I had this internal kind of compass where I was always afraid I'd be exposed even if I used a pseudonym. So I just never did it. And I've noticed in my interviews, I'm not the only one who feels this way. So another part of the puzzle is parenting. Like, I
Yeah.
knew my parents wouldn't hesitate to invade my privacy. And there was, in some ways, I wish that wasn't my upbringing. In other ways, it prevented me from getting into darker stuff because I like the curiosity, like, I, forget it, right? If I knew, I'd have to face my dad being like, well, why were you on Arrowhead, the drug website, like for
Yes.
however many hours or something? I just didn't, I don't need to know.
Yeah. Yeah. Which even then, it's almost like a religious thing. It's like if you're a Catholic and you just know God sees everything, then you are going to be thinking twice because now you understand that there is a sin that could be on your permanent record. A lot going into it. And it's stuff that you can read about on a regular basis on default.blog. Katherine, thank you so much for coming on the show. Hopefully this won't be the last time, and we will hopefully not just talk about dark, sick subcultures that lead to car bombings.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And that will wrap it up for us today. Politics is brought to you by everybody who makes it me. I write it, I edit it. Thank you to Kirk Bado. Thank you to Katherine Dee. Kirk Bado, go to National Journal. Katherine Dee, default.blog. I really appreciate that she came on. This isn't her normal thing. She doesn't normally plug into the political world. So I was happy that she crossed that threshold. Hopefully you guys like her writing as well. Will Saddleberg is our producer, our editor, our guiding light. And Will, just because the wind, just play the stuff from another episode where I say the rest of it.
You can email me, theyoungamerican@gmail.com. You can find me on YouTube. That's where a lot of people have found the show. We are growing on YouTube. Thank you very much. Politics is where you find me. You can hit me up personally, Justin R. Young on X. If you would like to support us with a one-time donation, paypal.me/payjury. Venmo is Justin-Young-20. Cash App is PX3Cash. Send me anything you'd like in the mail. Post Office Box 153184, Austin, Texas 78715. Of course, you can always get our bonus content at TakePoliticsSeriously.com. Paying members get 2 bonus episodes each and every week. That's, essentially, it's $3 a week. Less than that, a little bit. $3 a week. Price of a cup of coffee. If you buy me a cup of coffee once a week so I can be in your car or jogging next to you or walking next to you twice a week, then it's a deal. It's a deal. Or knock that down, man. $3 too much a week. Do it for less. $99 for the entire year. And at this point, we're into the primaries on the midterms by the time you got to think about it again. Oh, baby. Come on. You got to do it. 150 episodes of PX3 for under $100. That's less than $1 an episode. We're talking about change. What on earth can you get in America for less than $1? I mean, an episode of PX3. That's what you can get if you support us. But only our founding tier gets their name read at the end of the show, like these fine folks in our Titanic founding tier. L3PO, Peepaw, Scott, Middle-Aged Mike, Tom, Sarah Jeannie, Jeremy, Pro Idiot, Chiller Tomatoes. Oh yeah, it's Adam. Neil, AB Puppy, Dr. Whiskey, Michael, Fat Tony BJ's from New York, Will, The Borge B, Matthew, Matt, Andrew, Edwin, Sam, Andrew, Phil, Edison, Devon, Paul, A Dog Named Checkers, Gloria, my mom, Jerry L. Trucker, John, Berkeley Steven, and Zombie Doc. You want your name read on the show? Head on over, TakePoliticsSeriously.com.
But wait, I got to get here for the end. A reminder that some shows talk about politics, other shows talk about politics, and still more discuss politics, but this is the only show that dares discuss. Oh, 3.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
Dog and Pony Show audio.